Hey guys, it's Will from Potato Strong here. It's about 1:30 today. I just thought I'd show you some of the salad I have left here. Spinach, tomatoes, cucumber, English cucumber roll with tomatoes. Nothing too fancy. Usually put red and green pepper in there. Dressing, I just put balsamic vinegar, a delicate balsamic vinegar. Some people can get flavored ones, or you can put a combination of vinegar, mustard, and maple syrup or agave. Make a 3-2-1 dressing. But I like it easy. I just pour it out of the bottle, pretty quick and dirty. For breakfast, I had a smoothie, bananas and strawberries. I'll show a picture of that. And I had pasta, whole wheat linguine in a sauce that I use crushed tomatoes. In water, I fry up onion, red and green pepper, garlic, and even put in kale now, red kale. And and then some spices, Italian spices, and red pepper flakes usually if you want it a bit hotter. So just a couple of things I wanted to chat about. I just keep trying to repeat the message that, you know, if you're struggling with your weight or you're stuck, that the key part, you know, one of the key concepts is to focus on what you're eating. Because I get a lot of questions about how much to eat, or focusing on the wrong issue as far as what is probably causing the problem. And it comes down to the calorie density idea. So every food has a certain amount of calories per pound. And standard American diet is just too rich in calories. And so people don't really have a it's not really anybody's fault. Like, everybody eats the same amount of food, basically, the same volume, the same amount of bites. I was just watching a video with Doug Lyle and Bananiac. I'll post a link to it. He's telling me, you know, if everyone eats the same amount of bites, basically per week or day, if you try to restrict that, it's just going to blow up. You're going to binge and you're going to go off the rails. And so, and from a weight perspective, you know, I read somewhere that everybody eats, I don't know, 3 or 4 pounds of food, so there's a certain amount of weight. So we're all eating the same, essentially, taking the same number of bites, eating the same amount of food, volume-wise, if you want to put it that way, roughly. And so by changing the caloric density to fruits and vegetables, legumes and whole grains, that you're going to basically naturally lower that caloric intake from what you were eating on a standard American diet. And then if you're doing this vegan diet and you're still having problems, you can look within that diet. I mean, just because it's vegan doesn't mean necessarily it's not as rich as well. There's a lot of products that have hidden sugars and oils. There's a lot of simulated beef products like sausages and margarine and all that. People using oil. Once you get rid of all that and you're just basically down to the plants, like to the fruits and vegetables and legumes, you know, I would probably guess that most people aren't really consistently sticking to that. There's restaurants involved where there's potentially unknowns and snacks, crackers and things, chocolate. So there's a lot of things that can cause issues if you get to that point where you're really consistent. And then if you're really consistent with that, you can look at the higher density calories, like the flours, like the refined flours, nuts, and potentially bring it even down from there. So, you know, you still want to eat a certain amount of food. You're just going to have that instinct, so you don't want to try to hold that back. I mentioned a smoothie. So I base a lot of my, you know, obviously this is healthy eating, but I base a lot of my eating on hunger and sort of what you can do is write down what you eat and sort of in what time, and make a note of how long it lasted. So sometimes when I don't eat enough, if there's a leftovers in a container and it's not quite enough, I just make a mistake of kind of eating just that, and then within an hour or two I'm hungry again. So, you know, I have a sense of some of the things that I eat and how long they're going to last. Like when I was eating the oatmeal breakfast, you know, I can get a good 3 hours out of it, 2-3 hours. And you need to eat enough oatmeal as your main starch. Baked fries on a plate with veggies and gravy or ketchup. it can last quite a few hours. What I've been doing lately, and I've sort of reached a pretty happy weight, leanness, I guess. Everyone can get leaner, I guess, to a certain extent. But once I kind of plateaued as far as getting down to a pretty happy weight, like fat content, I stopped really worrying about the scale and that. And what I'm doing now is I do some body weight exercises, and that's just for bone density and for physical appearance versus, and to try to stay a little bit limber and flexible rather than doing exercise purely for, fat loss. But once you get to if you get to the point where you're maintaining your weight at a healthy point, which is where I've been at, I started to think about, let me just try having a smoothie. I generally was, following McDougall and against sort of blending the food and eating smoothies, but I was getting some bananas on sale, made some ice cream here and there, and I made a smoothie in the morning, and it was really good, and I felt good. And so personal experience always comes into play. A lot of times we try to ask other people, but when you give it a try and see how you're doing. So I generally recommend everybody stick to the starch solution, get to a certain weight. You can stick to that for life, no problem. But there are some people that kind of like fruit, and they came from Raw before or other scenarios, and they still kind of want to eat more fruit. So I wanted to see how I'd react, and it's been great. And so what I noticed was, like, this morning I had a smoothie at 9 o'clock, and it was like 1:30 before I even wanted to eat lunch. So I may reduce it a bit, but it was around 7 bananas with about a cup of frozen strawberries. I don't really measure, but maybe a cup of frozen strawberries. It's pretty thick, and it's kind of cold because I like it cold, not super cold like ice cream, but it's not warm, not room temperature because of the bananas. So I use frozen strawberries, and it's great. It's not heavy. You feel satiated, but you're not super bogged down. So I'm going to keep trying that and see how it goes, but I'm enjoying that. And, we can't be too dogmatic and anal about, what we eat to the point where we're arguing about fruit. It's just, to me, ridiculous. Like, if McDougall had 4 fruit, he's basing his diet on starch and saying, you don't want to add too many more fruits or vegetables on top of that. But to me, if you replace a meal with a fruit meal, and the thing is with fruit, personally, like in Canada, I'm not going to be doing like all watermelon or juicy, watery fruits that people eat in the tropical areas. Bananas are starchy, and they ripen, and they've got, roughly 100 calories. So it's similar to a potato. That's how I see it. So if you're going to go from 4 fruit a day to 7 or 8, I mean, is that really a big deal? As far as blending goes, I eat a lot of whole foods, and I'm not worried if I blend a few things. I sort of see blending as like pre-digestion. It can actually help in some cases. It takes the load off your body. There's people that advocate that, as far as like athletes who don't want to use a lot of energy to consume the food, to process it. But I mean, I make gravy, there's ketchup and things that are blended, sauces, tomato sauces. I mean, there's some things that are going to be blended and some things that are going to be whole, like vegetables and so. Anyways, I've talked to some people, and there's really not a lot of science on it, like good science as far as blending and all that stuff. So I really don't want to get into the weeds about fruit and vegetables and stuff like that. I think if people are eating fruit and vegetables, I think it's a good thing. We want to encourage that. So, what I wanted to talk about, I was talking about the calorie density and the richness. So that we're all eating kind of the same amount of food for a certain body size, and I think that just by lowering that caloric density to the fruits and vegetables is going to make a huge difference. Just what people are eating in the standard American diet with the cheese and oil and meat and everything and fish and everything is just way too heavy for what we need for our daily lives. And my buddy Jay from Plant Based Athlete just did a thing on consistency. Sometimes I get stuck, trying to think of something to do in a video because I've done a bunch of recipes and I generally eat the same kind of thing every day. You've got my baked fries and my oatmeal and my salad and pasta and rice and beans, and it's basically the same thing day in and day out. And so there's only so many things you can do. But once in a while, I get the urge. I create something different. I made shepherd's pie. So I made a kind of a cheese sauce, and I pour that on the shepherd's pie. I use a sweet potato, and you can use a regular potato, and I blend that with nutritional yeast and I used almond milk, but you could try water. Or I just experiment with things and or modify stuff that I see online. And then I'm probably going to use this in a mac and cheese. I did try a butternut squash and pumpkin, and it was great for the first minute, but then I found it too rich and too strong taste. So I really like this one. So you can check that out on my website, and this could be poured onto a mac and cheese and as well and baked. So consistency, like Jay said, is huge. Doing this day in and day out and not looking for a quick fix, and just sticking to it. But the calorie density thing, if you're a meat eater, paleo, just find foods. Like I've got tons of recipes, just eat those and you'll be satiated. I see things about, you need to eat lots of fat or you need the protein to keep you satiated. But this morning, like I said, I've been having a smoothie, and I think there's volume aspect, your stomach receptors, your stretch receptors, and then there's also your body detecting what's in the food. Is there calories in there? Is there enough? And it's not really, years ago I read The Zone, and there was about protein and all that, and it just got people into the off the rails with calorie restriction and trying to eat fat and protein instead of the carbs. So I've been finding satiation a lot in the carbs, but protein's great in like beans and just regular plant food. Like I don't even track. I eat beans and potatoes and spinach and everything. If you add up that protein, it's probably 10 or 15%. And that's just fine, whatever those ratios are. I don't want to get into the weeds about reductionism, just focusing on eating plant foods. Okay, so those are some tips for you guys. I'll show you a couple pictures and of what I ate, what I'm eating, and we'll talk to you guys next time. See ya.